Hey there, Urban LA Living Managers. This is a quick tutorial on how to enter into one site a new tenant once you have the lease signed and the certified funds procured. All right, so I'm in the main page here. I'm going to go to New Prospects. All right. And I'm just going to get started entering in the information here. Everything in red obviously is a field that is necessary. You need to make sure that you get all of those in. Some of them we use, some of them we don't, and I'll let you know as we go which ones are which. Contact type doesn't particularly matter. I'm usually being contacted by phone or email, so I just usually put in phone call. And then as far as the floor plan, most of you will only have one or two types of selections here. Frankly speaking, it doesn't quite matter, but you can go ahead and just select whichever one you like. All right, so I'm going to enter in the the primary contact. It doesn't, if you have multiple occupants, it doesn't really matter which one is which. You can change that later, but for the time being, I'm just going to go ahead and pick the person that I was discussing the unit with first. So that is Phoebe Raft. There we go. How did you hear about us? This doesn't quite matter. I do go in and put Craigslist and then drive by, but we don't really take a look at that. When do you expect to move? This is the lease start date. Important that you get this right. And the lease start date in this case, as opposed to the property, I'm sorry, this is actually the physical date. You'll see I've been a bad monkey, and I have not yet advanced my date for separate reasons. But you're going to go ahead and put the lease start date. So the lease start date here is November 1st. I'm going to advance this to November. I'm going to select that. You can change this later, but it is best to get this right out of the get-go. How many people will be living in the apartment? This is important. You are listing the number of occupants. You're going to disregard, for the moment, cosigners. So here it's 2. It's a husband and wife. We're putting in 2 here. The phone number I'm going to put in. It is important that you do list that here so that down the road, for coverage, if you ever decide to move on, we have contact information. We don't need to dig for it. Of course, these numbers change, but you do want to make sure to go put something in there. I usually just put in the phone number, unless Rebecca changes this and wants us to also put in an email address. She may let us know, but I just put in the phone number. Great. I can do one of two things here. I can hit save and move on, or I can hit save and add contact if I have an additional occupant and or a co-signer. Again, you can go either route and then add that occupant later. I like to do it now, so I'm going to go ahead and hit save, add contact. And we should get a window to pop up here to let us do that. Now, I'm actually kind of glad this happened because some of you are going to be working on a Mac. And normally in this situation where we are at in the entering in process, by default the application window would have popped up here, but it has not. And the reason that it has not is because one site is continually developing support for browsers other than Internet Explorer. This may be a little bit of a frustration for some of you, but I can tell you that now we do have full functionality in both Safari and Chrome. You'll just find that various functions may break on different browsers at different times. But once you get used to it, you'll know how to kind of get around this because we can go and pull up the window manually that was about to pull up. And I can show you how to do that. So we are going to go look for this prospect, which is what they are, in the prospect tab up here. And then we can send them through the application process. So I'm going to look her up by her last name, which we've already entered in, which is Shraft. And make sure that you have name here highlighted, not unit, obviously, because, well, unit doesn't even exist, so name. All right, we're going to look for her. There she is. And what we're going to now do is hit view, and that'll pull up her her prospect ledger. Ruh-roh. Okay, so this is good. I'm showing you all the things that you may have to do when you're entering new tenants in. So obviously there's something jammed here, which again happens before. And what I do in this situation is I just go into Chrome and I try it there. Hello. Okay. Okay. Let's try again. Okay, Gemco Investments. Great. All right, prospects. Try again. Shraft. She is. Frankly speaking, Chrome usually does better with these windows. For some reason, I was trusting Safari for a while because it was working perfectly, but recently Safari's been breaking a little bit more than Chrome. But I haven't had any issues with Chrome. So here we are. And this is the window that would have popped up by default the first time. But just to show you how to get there, again, you're going into prospects and you're entering the name to find them. Okay, so we're going to apply now. Actually, I'm sorry, we are not going to apply now. We can do this one of two ways. I can get the tenant moved in and everything set up and then add the second occupant later. But like I said, I like to do it right away. And by clicking New on Contacts, I can go ahead and take care of that. So this little window pops up, and this is actually the window that would have popped up when I hit Save and Add New Contact a little bit back. This window would have popped up. If I had just hit Save, then this window would have popped up if it was not expecting to add a new contact. But there you have it. You can get to the menu just the same. Okay, so her husband's name is Michael Hull. Actually, it's not her husband. They're not married. Sorry. And then this is kind of important here. You're going to put them in as adult co-head of household. Okay? And equally important, right here, you need to make sure that you click this contact as a lease signer and also occupant. I like to click these both. Rebecca needs us to at least put in as occupant, but if you also have them as lease signer, you've got both your bases covered. Obviously, if it's a co-signer or a guarantor, then we are not going to click occupant. That's very important. And the reason this is important here, just so you're aware, is that when Rebecca is running certain reports, for various reasons, she needs to know who's living in the unit and who's not. As far as between a cosigner or guarantor, we actually don't distinguish between the two. We just really use cosigner, but you can clarify that later. I would just click cosigner. Okay, so I'm going to hit save. If I wanted to add another occupant, if you have 2 bedrooms or larger units, or you have multiple cosigners, you can add another one, but we're done here. We're just going to hit save. Cool. All right, now we're going to hit apply now. And this is sort of an example of where we actually don't use the full functionality of OneSite. This is an application process functionality that OneSite has, but we don't use it. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and fly through these menus here by just clicking next. You do want to make sure that each menu generates fully before you just blow through them, because that's a place where OneSite can get jammed up. It's kind of an archaic system the way it's built, but you do need to just let them fully generate. You're going to stop when you get to select unit down here. Most of you will not be able to proceed until you've actually selected one, but depending on how it was set up, you may actually be able to just kind of blow through this, and then you'll get to the end and you won't be able to proceed any further because you have not generated a unit for them. So I'm going to go ahead and hit new quote. And then we'll get a list here of the vacant units, and I've only got one, so 312 is going to generate here. I'm going to hit quote. These pieces of information here are not quite so important. If you've entered in the lease start date on that very first menu correctly, you will have 12 months by default. If you don't, then you may want to contact Rebecca and make sure that we get this to a 12-month cycle, but by default they all should be. Okay, so I'm going to hit finish, and don't worry that it says $0. Obviously, that's not her rent, or their rent, I should say. We're going to fix this later, but you just need to get this unit to be considered available. All right, so this menu we don't need. You can see it's opened up a separate browser window. We don't need that, and frankly, we don't need this. We actually don't need this menu. We'll X out of that, and then you should see the menu here pop up with the unit quote that you've just generated. All right, we're going to click that circle, and now we're going to move on next. Additional options, you shouldn't have anything there. And then here what you're going to have is the expected deposit. Now, let me just be clear here. The number that you're going to enter in here is actually not the deposit that you've received. To distinguish, incidentally, it will be the same number because the deposit that one site is expecting to receive is going to be the same amount that the tenant has given you, because if not, then they're not moving in. You want to make sure that you've in fact received the deposit that you've agreed upon. But what we're entering here is not the actual physical money order or cashier's check that you've ordered or received. You're entering in the amount that one site will be expecting to receive as this person's deposit. Okay, so in this case it's $1,400. Oh, not 14,000. No. 1,400. And then these are not so important. Pricing here. And then late method, obviously we do have to pick something, and it is important that we do have a late fee method set up. If you don't have one set up, then you can discuss with Rebecca how to get this going. Okay, now we're going to hit next. Now we get this summary window, and we are going to click finish. Before I hit finish, this is another spot where occasionally one browser or the other or both will break and won't actually generate an automatic window for the next step. Let's see if it does it. A little bit of a stall. I'm worried. All right. So you see I had a little trouble there. Looks like we are getting the default window, but we should get a little, there it is, this little window to pop up here, which is just sort of a shortcut. Again, you don't need this window in order to perform these tasks, but if you can get these to pop up, it's kind of handy. It allows you to enter in your initial payment and the lease sign date immediately. Okay, so I like to go bottom up. That's just me. I'm going to click the hyperlink, and what it's asking for is the lease signed date. Now, you will only be able to choose the current date back. You won't be able to, obviously, to choose future dates. You want to go ahead and click the date that you've signed the lease. In this case, we've signed it 2 weeks prior to their move-in date. This isn't particularly important, but it is relevant information. So go ahead and get it on the right date. Okay, I'm going to hit save. Okay, deposit. I'm going to go ahead and click deposit here. We're going to enter in the cashier's check. Okay, so the deposit is sometimes split between various tenants. You may have 10 money orders all adding up to the proper amount. You need to make sure that you're entering in individual money orders and cashier's checks and not just the entire amount, even though you have 5 separate money orders. So the amount here is $1,400. Now again, this is to distinguish with what we entered in earlier, which is the amount that one site is expecting to receive. This is the actual amount that we collected the day that we signed the lease and took the security deposit. So You're not letting anybody move in without the full amount collected of the deposit and the first month's rent, obviously. So this amount should be the full deposit. Okay, the document number is the check number, and that is what I'm entering in now. Okay, process payment. If I had multiple money orders for the deposit, I would go ahead and click this hyperlink again. It'll open up the same window, and you'll be able to click it again. Now, also important to understand, let's assume we try to design a scenario where you have not round numbers of checks that correspond exactly with the full deposit. Let me tell you what I mean. Let's assume that we have a $1,200 deposit and the first month's rent is $1,203.61. That's $2,403.61. But the money orders that you've received are for $1,000, $1,000, and $403.61. Obviously, you don't have a deposit in two checks for exactly $1,200. So what do? How do you figure this out? So the way that you would do it is you would enter in the first money order of $1,000 in the deposit section, and then for the second money order to get you to $1,200, which is the agreed upon deposit, you would take your $403.61 money order and enter it in as $200, even though the money order is for $403.61, and you would enter in that money order, and then when you go to payment here, which is the first month's rent that you're collecting, you would enter in the additional $203.61 with that corresponding money order number. You got any questions about that, you can ask Rebecca, but you want to make sure that you're not just, for instance, in our $1,200 deposit example, that you're not just entering in one money order for $1,200 because you didn't get a money order for $1,200. And basically the reason that we do this is to make sure that on the accounting side, when Tracy is going through the ledger, that we have an exact amount and we know where the amounts are coming from which money order. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to collect the payment now. That whole scenario does not apply to Phoebe because we just got one money order from her bank, which is a bank check. And here we go. So $1,403.61, and the document number 0902602826. Good. All right. There we go. Now we've told one site, and I don't know if you can see it up here, we've told one site we've received the deposit, we've received the first month's rent, and if you can see here, the amount that we told one site to expect, $1,400, it's in red because until I hit close, one site has actually not received the deposit yet, so it's showing it in the red. I'm going to hit close, and then there, boom, it changes to $1,400. Great. All right, we're not out of the woods yet. Got some stuff here to get set up, but this is the basic ledger, the basic tenant profile that you should be used to at this point. There's a variety of things that we can do here, and I'll just show you the order that I do things in. As you recall, we have not set up their rent yet, or their SCEP fee, or any additional fees that you may have at your particular building, parking, pet fee if you have it, although I don't think any of our properties are charging pet fees, any additional monthly item. And one site's great in the sense that you set up a recurring billing so that every beginning of the month, automatically the rent, the SCEP fee, and any additional items will automatically bill, so you don't need to do that for every tenant every month. So now, what we're showing here is no items is the current items that are being billed to the tenant on today, at least the system date, which is the 13th of October. And again, today is the 15th. You want to make sure that you are advancing the date every single day unless you have a particular item that has not been resolved yet for a tenant and you need to withhold the date. But in that case, you may want to mention it to Rebecca as to why your date is not yet advanced. Okay, and that's very important because when it comes to tenant statements, if it's the 20th of the month and you are still back on the 8th, that's bad news bears because we need to make sure that those statements get approved for the trash, water, and sewer amounts, so those can get out to the tenants on time. So make sure you're advancing the date. Anyway, so today, October 13th, this tenant has not moved in yet. They don't move in until the 1st of November, so there are no items being billed for this tenant. There isn't anything. And until you hit future, it will not show you anything. All right, so obviously, as you saw earlier in the window that generated the lease terms, which showed how much rent she'd be paying every month as 0, this is where we're going to go ahead and change that. So make sure you click it to future, and you're going to hit edit. Excuse me, I'm still getting over a cold here. And you're going to go ahead and change these items in here. You're going to keep it as rent. That's the rent code. And you are going to change the rent to the base rent, not including the SCEP fee. So in this case, $1,400. The start date by default is correct. Again, that's why you put that 11/1/2016, that first, when you have that brand new prospect, it's pulling this date for everything. So if you get that wrong, you have 12 different places you need to fix it. So that's why it's good to get it right the first time. Okay, so 11/1/2016, and then it's by default set to keep going until 2099. Of course, when we do rental increases, Rebecca will change the reoccurring rental amount once you've served the appropriate notices. Okay. When you do a mid-month move-in, which at some point I will do an additional video to show you how I set that up, because one site does its own proration based on an algorithm that after 8 years I've not yet been able to figure out. There's a way that you can kind of get around it so that you can automatically have everything set the day that you enter in the lease, so that when we get to the first of the month, confusing things don't happen. So for right now, we're not going to do that because this is not a mid-month move-in, but I'll have an additional tutorial that'll show you a mid-month move-in at the appropriate time. So we're not going to click this. We're just going to click Do Not Prorate. And this will just tell the system to not automatically prorate things when it comes time to move out. Privately, I'll tell you that in some cases it does it anyway. So this is somewhat misleading, but I click it anyway. Let's just leave it there. Okay, so we're going to hit save. Great. Okay, so what this is saying is on the first of every month, the tenant will be billed $1,400. We also need to put in the SCEP fee, and for reasons that I can't quite recall, SCEP is not automatically being billed every month, and it's just something that I've never gotten around to changing. Obviously, I know to make sure every time I move somebody in, we make sure that the SCEP fee is being put in there. So I would hit New Current, and the code for SCEP is already in there. You just put SCEP. You can also hit this little magnifying glass, and you can kind of go through the menu. Let's see some of the other things that are automatic or continuously, what's the word I'm looking for? Reoccurring every month. You may have parking. Let's see here. There's a parking fee in here somewhere. Parking, there you go. If you had a parking fee monthly, you can stick that in there. That's really the only monthly fee other than the SCEP fee that I can think of, but you may have things that I don't know about. Okay, I'm going to hit close, and then you should see here, great, so the SCEP fee, again, you want to start on the first of every month, and I also hit Do Not Prorate. Okay, and there you go. So this is telling us that on the first we get $1,400 worth of rent applying every month and $361 applying every month. Again, if I put it back to current, these are going to disappear because on the 13th of October, nothing is being billed to the tenant because the tenant doesn't exist yet. Okay, put it back to future if you want to. Great. Okay, next, lease summary. I go in here. There's a few things we need to adjust. We need to make sure they're being billed for trash, water, sewer. Great, and again, this is starting on the 1st of November, the lease start date, hit OK. Then you do the same thing for the water, click this little calendar, the 1st of November, hit OK. And then I click these two little boxes. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure whether or not um, the management company actually bills the tenants for a setup fee. I don't actually think that we do, but it is in the trash, water, and sewer rider, the build setup fee. So that's a nice little question for Rebecca. I will ask her sometime. But my understanding is that actually we do not bill this tenant for the setup fee. Okay, and then we're good. We'll just hit save. Almost done. We are going to go into actually here into the primary tenant. I'm going to hit edit. And I'm just going to make sure that here in the billing information that by default it always defaults to the alternate billing address and then it's blank. In the past we've had some issues with tenants having their bills received, which hopefully is not something that you run into. But just to be certain, I make sure that I click the unit address. And if you're curious as to why a zip code isn't listed here, I do have assurances from the company that the zip code is included on the bills that get sent out. I mean, you can verify that by taking a look at their bills later, but I just do this as a sort of a safety precaution. I do not do the billing via email. In fact, that option has been removed. I've just had issues in the past, so we keep it to paper billing, at least on my properties. So it may be different for you, but there you have it. Okay, I'm going to hit save. And we are effectively done with this tenant. This is a pretty standard move-in. If I had a mid-month move-in where I had to do a manual proration, I would come in here into the ledger and adjust that. Again, I'm going to do a separate tutorial on that, but I do want to come into the ledger here and show you if you goofed on the amount that you entered in as the deposit received, you can change that. You can change that at any time. If you go into deposits here, that'll show you the separate section for the deposits. And again, that first amount that we entered in, the required deposit, or as I called it, the expected deposit, that's that number here, which was highlighted in red up here. And then here is the actual money order. As you can see here, here's the document number. I think you can actually expand these. I forgot how to do that. Anyway, you can see here by, if you view, you can get the document number if you really want it. If you made a mistake, you can edit it. If you either made a mistake in the amount that was received or the amount that was expected, you just do it here in that edit panel, and you would go into here and change the amount of the certified check, and then you would just kind of type in a little reason for the error. Don't worry, we're not going to break your fingers. Just to put a little note for yourself or for Rebecca as to why that change was made. I'm going to hit cancel because I did it perfectly. Okay, and then of course, if you need to change the required deposit, you could do it here and then edit that amount there. Okay, we're done. One little thing I'm going to tack on here. At some point, I may do a separate tutorial on this, but a lot of people have questions about two things. Firstly, if you want to go in and take a look at the bills that the tenants are receiving, you can actually generate that by going up here to Velocity, and by digging through the resident billing, you can actually go and take a look at their statement by navigating through this menu by unit number, and actually generate the bill that they have just received. I'm not going to go through this. It's pretty intuitive, but you can actually go ahead and take a look in there. Oh, what did I do? All right. I'm going to go back to one site. And then something else that is kind of important is how to run a delinquency report. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You go into Reports, SDE, and Tasks. I'm going to go to Accounts Receivable. Just a little footnote here. At times when things were not working properly, where they were starting to develop support for Chrome and for Safari, these fields here would be in red, which means that they're not available. I guess there's an outside chance that they would break to the point where we would not be able to run a delinquency report, but I'm going on a year now where we haven't had that issue at all. So if it's red, that's why, but luckily that's not the case. Okay, so I'm going to go to delinquency report and hit generate. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove former residents so that you don't get a list of all of the knuckleheads that moved out with balances, because those will remain. And if you've been doing this as long as I have, you're going to have knuckleheads. It's just going to be the way it is. And I don't want those to appear on my sheet. I'd love to see a delinquency report that has nobody on it. And, it just gets disheartening when you're ready to do your 3-day notices and you have a list of 50 people when really you only have 5 or 6 people that are late. So anytime anybody moves out with a balance, it would appear here. So anyway, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to remove the former residents by clicking that. Something else that I do, and this is a great little tool. You can set the parameters for what delinquency amount the system is going to be looking for. Now, I'm of two minds about this. Firstly is you do want to get all of your tenants paid up. What's going to happen is you're going to have folks that will forget to pay trash, water, and sewer. They'll pay strange amounts. And listen, we're not going to be serving notices on $2, but when your trash, water, and sewer charges that go unpaid start to accumulate and get to the $80, $100, $200, now you need to start serving them notices on that delinquent balance. We need to get people's ledgers as square as possible. So when I'm doing late rent and I know that I've got a tenant that's got an $80 balance, I'm going to go ahead and set this parameter above that amount. Just for giggles, I'm going to put $200, which is, if you've got a tenant with a $200 balance, that's no bueno. We'll let Rebecca determine what the amount is that you want to go ahead and start serving notices, but just for the sake of argument, I'm going to go ahead and put 200. And then the top limit doesn't matter. Okay, I'm going to hit execute. And then here we go. And here is my one tenant with a balance. In fact, I'm pretty sure nobody cares, but the reason she's got a balance is this tenant decided to rip up her own carpet for reasons we can't possibly imagine, and we of course charged her to replace the carpet. So the carpet cost was $457.60, and we have now put that on her October ledger for November's bill. So this amount will appear on her bill, and that's why it's showing as a total delinquent. It's in fact not considered delinquent yet, and we're probably going to give her about 2 or so months to make sure that gets paid up. Cool. So you can actually do one of two things. You can screenshot, you can print it, you can actually, I think from one site, send it to a PDF. I'll let you all figure that out, but I usually on a Mac, I just do a screenshot, and the command for that is Shift Command 4. And then you drag your little box, and there you go. And I would use that in my Dropbox account here for my 3-day notices if I was doing those now. This is a great little tool to see who's delinquent. Quick way to do it. All right, that's it, guys. Again, look out for the video that shows you how to do a mid-month move-in to try to keep all the prorations nice and automated and square, but that will come at a later date. Alrighty,